my daughter was a baby. This was over 5 years ago. Her name's Willow. When she was our first child. And when we first had her, she was the hardest kid to put to sleep. I don't know if you've ever tried to put a baby to sleep before. Some babies are super easy. Willow was impossible. She was impossible. We would have to do everything, to holding her, to rocking her, wooing in her ear. We tried every trick in the book just to get this girl to fall asleep, and it was difficult, and I had no idea what I was doing. Some of my friends who had kids at the time would say, hey, our kids, our baby takes a nap for 3 hours every afternoon, and we're sitting here going, we are lucky if we get 45 minutes, right? One of the worst things would happen, though, when we finally would get her to fall asleep, when after all the hard work of everything that we'd have to do, the most awful thing and annoying thing would happen. My dog would start barking, right? And he'd bark at anything, right? A leaf blowing across the yard, and he would just yap, 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 and go nuts. And all of a sudden, the silence, the quiet, it was gone, and the baby was up. Silence was so important to keeping her asleep. And I have to wonder, as we walk into this discussion, how you would answer this. How much silence and quiet do you have in your life? If you could just think for a second in your life, how much quiet and silence do you have a part of your life? Do you really take time to spend any time in silence, like intentionally? I think most of us, we rarely have moments in our life where we just have complete silence. And so I want to try something for a minute at the beginning, and this is going to be a little weird, okay? This is going to be a little weird, it's going to be a little uncomfortable, but we're going to try it. I want to spend 60 seconds, an entire minute, in just silence, okay? We're going to put a timer up on the screen, and I don't care what you do, but don't look at the timer. Just either close your eyes or look down. I don't care what you think about, but I want to spend 60 seconds in silence. Hit the clock. Let's go. All right. That was 1 minute of silence. How weird was that? You actually guys did a really good job of that. It was pretty quiet in here. Was that comfortable for you? Was it uncomfortable? Did you know exactly kind of what you should do in that moment? I wonder how much of our lives is filled with the exact opposite of that, just noise and constant things. In fact, you can kind of hear it right now. The air conditioning or the heat just kicked off, and all of a sudden it's even quieter in here than it was before. I planned that on purpose. I'm just kidding. Here's what I think as we close out this series called Intentional. If we aren't intentional about building silence into our lives, it's not going to happen. It is not going to be something that we do. You may never experience the type of silence that God wants for you in your life if we don't plan for it. In the Old Testament and even in the New Testament, the nation of Israel lived off this very important rule and practice and guideline called the Sabbath. You're probably familiar with that. It's one of the 10 Commandments, right? Honor the Sabbath. But this idea, the Sabbath, was formed around the idea that God created the world in 6 days, and then on the seventh day, he rested, right? And so this practice was put into place that we should take a regular rest from our work as well. And all throughout the nation of Israel's history, they practiced this. They obeyed the Sabbath. Now, over time, they got a little weird with it, and they started adding all these different rules and expectations, and they put all these extra things in place. They actually told people how many steps they could take on the Sabbath. They put all these extra guidelines along the idea, but the principle remained the same. It was always the same. It's important to stop, to step away, and to rest. I want us to be the type of people that don't live such busy lives that we don't ever rest. John Mark Comer wrote this book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And there's a quote in there that I want you to hear. This is what he says. He says, "For many of us, the great danger is not that we will renounce our faith. It's that we will become so distracted and rushed and preoccupied that we will settle for a mediocre version of it." It's this idea that not taking time to rest and to have a little bit of silence can make your faith suffer. Not in the fact that you will give up your faith or that you'll start following something different. No. Maybe even something different than that. That you'll be so busy that you'll settle for a version of Christianity, of following God, that is not what God has planned for you. So the idea, what we're going to look at tonight, is how do we be intentional about silence and Sabbath. A couple weeks ago, Christy was here and she talked about, or she mentioned this verse that we're going to take a look at real briefly from Mark chapter 1. It says this: "Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up. He left the house and he went off to a solitary place where he prayed." Jesus was intentional about silence and rest. And he was a busy guy, right? He had a lot of things that he was doing, but he set the example that it's important that no matter what you're doing or what's going on, that you get away, you step away, you have rest, you have silence. And so I have two ideas for you tonight to wrap this all up and to talk about this topic. Let's get started. Number one is to be intentional about finding silence. And I don't know if that sounds like something that is easy for you or not, but we all need to be intentional about finding silence. When you don't have any silence in your day, you don't give yourself the opportunity to be yourself with yourself. That sounded really weird, okay? But the idea is true. It's important. Look at Luke chapter 5. Another example of Jesus' life. It says, "Yet the news about him spread all the more, and so the crowds of the people came to hear him and to be healed of their sickness. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and he prayed." Jesus was intentional about getting away. He made it a point to do this, of having time to himself. And some of us are so busy, the thought of just having a moment to ourselves, time to yourself, silence just doesn't even seem doable. We've preoccupied ourselves with so many other things, but we've got to figure this out. So let me get practical for a minute. How do you do this? If I'm going to tell you to be intentional about having silence in your life, let me give you the answer of how we do this. And this is what I think it is that you have to turn things off, right? You have to turn things off. That's it. We live in a world where so much of the noise of your life comes from things with an on-off switch, right? Most of us have at least one or two of those things on us right now, right? Where we have things, where we're constantly surrounded by things that bring noise. Your phone, your TV, your headsets, your gaming systems, whatever it is, whatever you want to name it. We have to figure out and we have to learn that sometimes it's the right thing to just turn it off and to find some silence. Some of us don't like silence. I don't know if you find yourself, you're like that person where if there's quiet, like that's uncomfortable. If that minute was like, I don't like that, someone needs to start talking, or something like that. Some of us don't like silence at all, and so we will fill any silence with noise. Those are the type of people, and I'm not saying this is bad if this is you, but those are the type of people that if there's any moment to yourself or silence, you just put headphones in, right? Because you want to hear something, you got to listen to something, you need that noise. And we've got to figure out what this looks like. We've got to be able to turn things off. One of the things that I do sometimes when I'm driving in my truck is I'll just drive and I won't have the radio on or any music playing. Revolutionary, right? Almost everybody just has something playing in there or listening to something. But I just take those moments sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I just drive with nothing on. And it gives me a moment to think and to collect my thoughts and have a moment of silence with myself as I'm doing something routine. What could this look like for you? Because I don't know what it is for you, what you need to turn off, what's causing noise in your life, but what is it for you? What could you turn off? Not forever, not for a whole day, maybe it is, but momentarily, what could you turn off just to give yourself a little bit of silence in your day? Would it be beneficial to you? It'd be a great way for you to think about this. Would it be beneficial for you to do that? I've started doing something else in my life as well. In the morning when I read the Bible, I've started doing this over the past couple months. It's made a huge difference for me. I just take 1 minute. I don't set a timer. It's just like internally. I take 1 minute and I just like sit in silence and calm myself before I start reading. Because what I had noticed was when I don't do that, I just read and I just try to get it done and I just want to move on. But I've stopped and I said, almost like what we did with that song, where I just need to be quiet. I just need to center myself, focus myself, no agenda, and just to focus. If you aren't intentional about finding silence in your life, then it may never happen. That's what I want you to understand that. And when we do have those moments where you have silence, you may wonder why you don't have more of those. It's because we have to plan for it. We have to plan these moments in our lives. Here's the second idea, is that we need to be intentional about finding rest. Now, some of you probably think, hey, I got this down. Listen, on Saturdays, I sleep till 1 o'clock, right? I'm really good at resting, but that's probably not so great to do for the long haul. Rest in the way of the Sabbath is about stepping aside from your work to regain strength and perspective, okay? Understand that. Rest in the way of the Sabbath is gaining strength and perspective by stepping aside and resting. Think about this. When God rested from his work, right, his 6 days of creating, and he rested, he looked and he saw all that was good. He gained perspective of everything that was around him. Rest is also for perspective. We've got to be able to find these ways from the busyness of our life to rest so that we can have a better perspective. Think of this verse. You've probably most likely heard this from Psalm 46. First part of verse 10 says this, "Be still and know that I am God." It's pretty simple, but what is interesting about this verse is our understanding of this word still. When I've always heard the word still, I've always thought about, when I've been told to be still or to sit still, right? And that's always what I thought. And I find myself saying that to my kids sometimes, right? Sit still or be still, right? And it's this idea of don't move. But that's not really what this word means. In the original language of Hebrew, what this word was written in the Old Testament, this word is this word rapha, and it means to sink or relax. Think about that. Think of it like that. Just like relax. Relax, man. Just know that I am God. Just calm down for a minute and relax. Be intentional about finding rest in your life. It means that we just relax and we calm ourselves before God to be still. So how do we do that? What needs to happen? How do we accomplish this? How do we be intentional about finding rest? Let me give you what I think the answer is that you have to say no to things. In your life, you're going to have to begin to say no to things. You cannot say yes to every offer. You cannot open every text at the second it was sent. You cannot play Xbox every single night. You just are going to have to begin to say no to certain things in order to find the rest that you need. So what is that for you? What would that be for you? What in your life do you feel like maybe I need to begin saying no to this so I can find that rest in my life? And before you say it, I know what you're thinking. No, you can't say no to school, okay? You still got to go to school. You still got to do your homework and all that kind of stuff, right? What I'm actually talking about is physical rest. Not just gaining your 8 hours of sleep, but you need to find some time in your week. This doesn't even have to be an everyday practice. Sometime in your week where you just chill, where you just do something that gives you life, that fills you up. Read a book, paint a picture, I don't know what it is, watch a show. Something that relaxes you and fills you up with life and doesn't wear you down. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's what it looks like to rest in this understanding of the Sabbath. For me, what it looks like is 1 or 2 times a week, I just grab my guitar in my house and I go in a room and I play and I shut the door because no one wants to hear me play and sing at the same time in my house. And so I do that because playing guitar for me it's relaxing. I don't have to think. It's not stressful. It just comes naturally. And so I just do that. In fact, when it's nice outside, I like to go sit on my front porch and play. And so if you ever want to hear a really old guy play his guitar and sing out-of-tune worship songs, just swing by my house on a nice summer night and you might get lucky and find me out there. But for me, that's like if I find rest in that. It's relaxing to me. And I think for all of us, this is what we have to find. We got to find the things in our life that give us rest. Because what I'm not telling you to do is just like sit on the couch and just sit there, right? Like maybe for you that's what you need to do, but finding ways to fill your life with things that bring you rest is a good thing to do. We've got to find what calms us and relaxes us and to be intentional about that. So here's the question. This is what I want you to think about. When you can be intentional about rest, you'll be a better version of yourself. That's what this comes down to. When you can be intentional about this, you'll be a better version of yourself. So the question is, where can you find silence and Sabbath in your life? Think about that. This is what you're going to discuss in your groups tonight. Where in your life can you find silence and Sabbath? Because my guess is that for many of us, we are not batting very well on this. We're not doing very well. We are not intentional about finding rest and Sabbath and silence and all of those things. Does it happen sometimes? Probably, but not intentionally. So the question for us becomes, how do I be intentional? How do I make sure this is a part of my life? Listen, if this was a practice that God himself did when he created the world, do you think that maybe it might be important for you? Do you think if over and over in the Gospels we see Jesus pulling himself away from healing people and preaching the gospel so he can be alone to pray or to be alone from the crowds, do you think maybe it might be a beneficial thing for you to figure out as well? It's an important thing to consider. If God himself, if Jesus set the example as well, why would he not expect us also to find some rest and Sabbath? That's what I want you to think about. This series has all been about making a plan, right? Not leaving things to chance. What it looks like to be intentional about reading Scripture, about praying, about serving others, about worshiping God, and about finding some silence. What does it look like to be intentional, to have a plan, not just hope that it happens? So in your groups tonight, you're going to get these little squares. And these are like Scrabble squares, right? And so you can kind of notice our graphic there. You guys have played Scrabble before, right? You know how this works, right? You don't just lay things on the board and hope that it comes together. You got to be really intentional about what you play and where you play it. And so you're going to get a couple of these squares tonight. And I'm just going to ask that you, at your stations or in your groups, you'll have some markers too. I want you to grab 4 of these squares and just write P-L-A-N on there, plan. And this is just to remind you, in your groups, I want you to talk about what you can do with these. But just to remind yourself that when it comes to your faith, the best practice that you can do, maybe for this year, is to be intentional, is to have a plan. Not just leave it to chance, not just hope it happens, not just hope that I grow or hope that I read or hope that I pray. Make a plan to make it happen, and that is true with silence and Sabbath as well. So grab those, write on them, take them with you, talk about what you should do with them, where you should put them, how to make this in front of you to remind yourself to make a plan. Don't leave it to chance. When we are intentional about our faith, that's when we grow in our faith. That's my hope and that's my prayer for you guys tonight, is that we would be intentional.